Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. The structure was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It looked more like a floating city made of crystal and metal, with gentle curves and soft lights that seemed to welcome visitors rather than intimidate them. "Distance to Harmony's Edge?" Jake asked his navigation officer. 200,000 kilometers in closing, sir," Lieutenant Danny Park replied. "The station is even bigger than our scan suggested. It's at least 50 kilometers across." Jake nodded. After 6 months of preparation and 3 weeks of travel, they were finally here. First contact with the Galactic Council would happen in less than 2 hours. The weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. Behind him, Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez checked her tablet for the 100th time that morning. She had memorized every detail about the Council's 847. Member species, their customs, their languages, and their history. But all that knowledge felt small compared to the reality of what they were about to do. "The escort ships are maintaining formation," reported Commander Tony Green from the tactical station. "All weapons are powered down as requested, but our defensive systems remain active." Lisa looked up from her tablet. "The Council specifically asked us to approach peacefully. They've been at peace for 3,000 years, Captain. They don't understand why we brought warships to a diplomatic meeting." Jake turned to face her. "Because that's what humans do, Ambassador. We hope for the best but prepare for the worst. These ships aren't just warships. They're our homes, our protection, and our way back to Earth if things go wrong." The communication officer, Ensign Mary Collins, looked up from her station. "Incoming transmission from Harmony's Edge. They're requesting permission to guide us to Docking Bay 7. "Grant permission," Jake said, "and send our acknowledgement in their language." As the horizon moved closer to the station, Jake could see hundreds of different ship designs docked at various ports. Some looked like giant flowers made of metal. Others resembled sea creatures with flowing lines and transparent sections. A few looked like geometric puzzles with no clear front or back. None of them looked like they were built for fighting. "Their ships are beautiful," Lisa said, joining Jake at the main viewing window. "But I don't see any weapons." "Maybe they don't need them," Jake replied. "Maybe they've really found a way to live without war. Or maybe they've forgotten how to fight," Tony added quietly. The docking procedure took 30 minutes. The station's technology was far more advanced than Earth's, but it was designed for cooperation rather than efficiency. Multiple species worked together to guide the human ships into position, each group handling a different aspect of the process. As Jake and Lisa prepared to disembark, they reviewed the protocol one final time. The Council had sent detailed instructions on proper behavior, greeting customs, and acceptable topics of conversation. The list of things humans should not mention was surprisingly long and included most of their history. "Remember," Lisa said as they walked toward the airlock. "Don't mention any wars, battles, or conflicts. Don't talk about weapons, military strategy, or defense planning. And absolutely don't bring up our nuclear weapons." "What are we supposed to talk about?" Jake asked. "Art, culture, science, exploration, and trade," Lisa replied. "The same things every other species talks about when they join the Council." The airlock opened to reveal a welcoming committee of 5 different species. The leader was clearly a Zalari, tall and elegant with blue skin and silver markings that seemed to shift in the light. Next to him stood a Cathani, whose form seemed to blur at the edges as if made of living mist. The other 3 species were new to human eyes, but Lisa had studied their descriptions carefully. "Welcome, humans of Earth," the Zalari said in perfect English. "I am Chancellor Vexitar, and I speak for the Galactic Council in extending our friendship to your species." Lisa stepped forward and performed the formal greeting gesture she had practiced. "On behalf of humanity and the United Earth Government, I thank you for this opportunity. I am Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez, and this is Captain Jake Morrison of our exploration fleet." The formal pleasantries continued for several minutes as each species introduced themselves and exchanged ceremonial gifts. Jake noticed that everything was done slowly and carefully with great attention to proper form and respect. It was very different from human diplomatic meetings, which tended to be more direct and efficient. They were escorted through corridors that seemed to have been grown, rather than built. The walls curved and flowed like living tissue, but they were clearly artificial. Soft lights provided illumination without harsh shadows, and the air carried the sense of growing things from a dozen different worlds. "Your station is remarkable," Lisa said as they walked. "How long did it take to build?" "Harmony's Edge was not built," Chancellor Vexitar replied. "It was grown over a period of 200 years, with each member species contributing their knowledge and abilities. It represents the best of what we can achieve when we work together in peace." They entered a vast chamber that served as the Council's main meeting hall. Representatives from hundreds of species filled floating platforms that surrounded a central speaking area. The diversity was overwhelming. Some beings were clearly organic, while others appeared to be made of energy or crystalline structures. A few seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "The Council wishes to learn about human civilization," Chancellor Vextar announced to the Assembly. "Ambassador Rodriguez, please tell us how your species resolves conflicts and maintains peace." Lisa felt hundreds of alien eyes focusing on her. This was the moment she had prepared for, but the weight of the questions surprised her. How could she explain human history without mentioning war? "Humans have developed many methods for resolving disputes," she began carefully. "We use negotiation, compromise, and democratic processes to make decisions. We have international organizations that help coordinate between different nations and prevent conflicts." "But what happens when negotiation fails?" asked a voice from the Assembly. The speaker was a Takari, one of the more logical species in the Council. Lisa hesitated. This was exactly the topic she had hoped to avoid. "When peaceful methods don't work, we have other options. We maintain military forces for defense and deterrence. We believe that being prepared to defend ourselves helps prevent conflicts." A murmur ran through the Assembly. The concept seemed to confuse many of the representatives. Chancellor Vexitar looked concerned. "You maintain armies even during peacetime? But why would you need weapons when there are no enemies?" "Because peace is not permanent," Jake said, stepping forward before Lisa could stop him. "Throughout human history, we've learned that those who cannot defend themselves become victims of those who choose violence. We prepare for war so that we can preserve peace." The reaction was immediate and uncomfortable. Several representatives began speaking at once in languages that sounded like music, mathematics, and sounds that had no human equivalent. The translator devices struggled to keep up with the sudden flood of communication. "Order, please," Chancellor Vextar called out. The chamber gradually became quiet again. "Humans, I think there may be a misunderstanding. The Council has maintained peace for over 3,000 years. We have no wars because we have chosen to evolve beyond such primitive behavior." Lisa tried to regain control of the situation. "We deeply respect what the Council has achieved. Humanity hopes to learn from your example and contribute to the continued peace of the galaxy." "But you bring warships to a peaceful meeting," observed another representative. "You speak of enemies and violence as if they are natural and inevitable. This is concerning to many of us." The formal session continued for 3 more hours, but the tone had changed. What had begun as a welcome ceremony became something more like an examination. The Council members asked detailed questions about human society, technology, and values. Many of their questions focused on why humans seemed so focused on conflict and defense. When the session finally ended, Lisa and Jake were escorted to guest quarters within the station. The rooms were comfortable and well-appointed, but they felt more like a comfortable prison than a diplomatic suite. "That could have gone better," Lisa said as soon as they were alone. "Could it have?" Jake replied. "We can't change what we are, Lisa. Humans are fighters. It's in our nature. We've survived because we're willing to do what's necessary to protect ourselves and the things we care about." "The Council doesn't understand that," Lisa said. "To them, we probably look like barbarians who haven't evolved past their violent instincts." Jake looked out the window at the peaceful station around them. Ships from hundreds of worlds moved in careful, coordinated patterns. Everything was orderly, efficient, and completely peaceful. It was beautiful, but it also seemed fragile. "Maybe we are barbarians," he said quietly. But barbarians survive when civilized people don't. I just hope they never have to learn that lesson the hard way. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Brooks walked through the corridors of Harmony's Edge, still amazed by how different everything felt compared to Earth's military bases. The walls hummed, with peaceful energy, and soft music drifted from speakers that looked like flowering vines. Ryan's job was to serve as the human military liaison, which mostly meant explaining to confused aliens why humans carried weapons and maintained standing armies. Most days he felt like a teacher trying to explain fire to creatures made of water. "Colonel Brooks," called out Dr. Helen Parker, the Council's chief xenobiologist. She was a Kethani, her misty form shimmering as she approached. "The Council has another question about human defensive protocols." "Let me guess," Ryan said, with a tired smile. "They want to know why we have emergency battle stations on our civilian ships." "Actually, they want to know why you practice combat drills during peacetime," Helen replied. "Chancellor Vextar believes it might be causing psychological stress to your crew members." Ryan stopped walking and looked at Helen through her translucent features. "We practice because when real danger comes, there's no time to learn. Muscle memory saves lives when your brain is too scared to think clearly." "But there is no real danger," Helen said gently. "The Council has maintained peace for 3,000 years. Why do you continue to prepare for conflicts that will never come?" Before Ryan could answer, an alarm began sounding throughout the station. It was a soft musical tone that seemed designed not to cause panic. Around them, various species began moving with calm efficiency toward their duty stations. "What's happening?" Ryan asked, his military training immediately making him alert. "Deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual energy signatures," Helen said, accessing a wall display with a gesture. "The signals are coming from the galactic rim, but they don't match any known Council technology." Ryan studied the display, noting the size and power of the energy readings. His expression grew serious. "Those signatures are massive. What kind of ships produce energy readings like that?" "We don't know," Helen admitted. "The Council is convening an emergency session to discuss the situation." They made their way to the main Council chamber, where representatives from dozens of species were gathering. The atmosphere was different from usual. Instead of the calm, measured discussions Ryan had observed before, there was an undercurrent of confusion and concern. Chancellor Vextar called for attention. "Fellow Council members, our long-range sensors have detected unknown vessels approaching from beyond our borders. All attempts at communication have been unsuccessful." A Takari representative raised one of its mechanical appendages. "Have we tried all standard greeting protocols? Perhaps they use a communication method we haven't encountered before." "All protocols have been attempted," the Chancellor replied. "The vessels continue to approach our outer colonies without responding to any communications." Ryan felt a cold sensation in his stomach. In his experience, ships that ignored communication attempts were usually not friendly. He looked around the chamber and saw confusion on the faces of species that had never encountered a situation like this. "What is the estimated time of contact?" asked a Yili delegate, its empathic abilities apparently picking up the growing anxiety in the room. "At current speed, the unknown vessels will reach the outer colony of Serenity Prime in approximately 72 hours, Chancellor Vextar announced. The chamber erupted in discussion. Ryan listened to the translation devices struggling to keep up with multiple languages being spoken simultaneously. What struck him most was that nobody was talking about defense or military preparations. They were all focused on finding new ways to communicate with the approaching ships. "Chancellor," Ryan said, standing up. "With respect, I think the Council should consider preparing defensive measures." The chamber fell silent. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him. "Colonel Brooks," and the Chancellor said carefully, "we appreciate your concern, but the Council does not engage in military action. We resolve all conflicts through peaceful negotiation." "But what if these ships don't want to negotiate?" Ryan asked. "What if they're hostile?" "Why would they be hostile?" asked a Novan delegate, its young features showing genuine confusion. "What could they possibly gain from violence?" Ryan opened his mouth to answer, then realized he was trying to explain concepts that these beings had never experienced. To them, the idea of conquest or aggressive expansion was literally unthinkable. 3 hours later, the first reports came in from Serenity Prime. The colony's communication array had gone silent without warning. Long-range sensors showed massive energy discharges in the area where the colony had been. Dr. Helen Parker worked frantically at her station, trying to analyze the limited data that had been transmitted before communications ceased. Her misty form flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among the Kethani. "The energy patterns don't match any known weapon systems," she reported to the emergency council session. But the colony's planetary shields were overwhelmed in minutes. Whatever hit them was incredibly powerful. Chancellor Vextar's silver markings had dimmed to almost gray. "Surely this is some kind of accident. Perhaps their technology malfunctioned, or there was a misunderstanding." Ryan stood up again. "Chancellor, I need to contact Earth immediately. Admiral Karen Stone is commanding our fleet at the border. She needs to know about this threat." "Colonel, there is no threat," the Chancellor insisted. "This is clearly a tragic accident. We will send a humanitarian mission to provide aid to any survivors." "And if there are no survivors?" Ryan asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. For 3,000 years, the Council had never faced the possibility of complete annihilation of one of their colonies. The concept was so foreign that many representatives seemed unable to process it. Admiral Stone's image appeared on the main screen 40 minutes later, transmitted from the UES Defiant at the outer perimeter. Her weathered face showed the kind of expression that Ryan recognized from combat veterans. "Colonel Brooks, I've been monitoring the situation," she said without preamble. "Our sensors detected the destruction of Serenity Prime. There were no survivors." The council chamber erupted again, this time with sounds of grief and disbelief rather than confusion. "Admiral," Chancellor Vexatar said, struggling to maintain his composure, "what do your sensors tell you about the attacking vessels?" "They're not like anything in our databases," Stone replied. "The ships appear to be organic in nature, possibly grown rather than built. They consume matter and energy from their targets, growing larger after each attack." "Consume?" Helen asked, her form flickering rapidly. "You mean they eat other ships?" "That's exactly what I mean, Doctor," Stone said, grimly. "And there are more of them now than when they started." Another alarm sounded through the station. This time the tone was more urgent. "Second contact reported," announced a Zalari technician. "The colony at Haven's Rest has gone silent. The unknown vessels are accelerating their approach." Ryan looked around the chamber and saw something he had never seen before in the 6 months since humanity joined the Council. Fear. Real, primal fear was beginning to replace the confusion and disbelief. "Council members," Ryan said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years preparing for moments like this. "These entities have now destroyed 2 of your colonies without any attempt at communication. They are not interested in negotiation or peaceful contact. They are predators. But surely we can find a way to communicate with them," protested a ethereal delegate. "All sentient beings can be reasoned with." As if in response to the delegate's words, the main screen activated with an incoming transmission. The image that appeared was unlike anything any of them had ever seen. It was a writhing mass of organic machinery, with structures that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. When it spoke, the voice was like the sound of metal tearing and worlds dying. "We are the Axiom," it said in perfect galactic standard. "You will serve our purpose or you will be consumed. Resistance is inefficient. Surrender is optimal." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. Ryan looked around, at the terrified faces of beings who had never imagined that such creatures could exist. "Council members," he said quietly, "now do you understand why humans prepare for war?" Chancellor Vextar's silver markings had gone completely dark. "Colonel Brooks," he said in a voice barely above a whisper, "what do we do now?" For the first time since joining the Council, Ryan saw something that gave him hope. They were finally asking the right questions. "Now," he said, "we learn to fight. General Peter Collins stepped off the transport ship onto Harmony's edge and immediately noticed the difference. The peaceful, flowing corridors now buzzed with frantic activity. Species that had spent millennia moving at a leisurely pace were now rushing between stations, their calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. 3 more colonies had fallen to the Axiom in the past week. Each attack was faster and more devastating than the last. The creatures were learning, adapting, becoming more efficient killers with every victory. General Collins, Chancellor Vextar greeted him at the docking bay. The Zalari's silver markings were flickering rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. "Thank you for coming so quickly. The situation has become complicated." Peter looked around at the assembled representatives. He recognized desperation when he saw it, regardless of the species, showing it. "Chancellor, I brought everything Earth could spare. 12 battle groups, support vessels, and our best tactical officers. But I need to understand what we're dealing with." They walked through corridors that now carried the sharp smell of fear, instead of the gentle perfumes Peter remembered from his first visit. Emergency lighting had been installed alongside the soft organic illumination, giving everything a harsh military appearance. "The Axiom have destroyed 7 colonies," Dr. Helen Parker reported as they entered the hastily converted war room. Her misty form was more solid than usual, compressed by stress into a nearly physical shape. "They consume everything, buildings, ships, even the planets themselves, and they're growing larger." Peter studied the tactical displays that human technicians had installed. The gentle, artistic interfaces of Council technology had been replaced with efficient military readouts that showed ship positions, energy signatures, and projected attack vectors. "What defensive measures have been attempted?" Peter asked. "Defensive measures?" repeated Commander Zixera, a Novan who had been appointed to lead the Council's newly formed Defense Committee. "We sent diplomatic ships to attempt communication. When that failed, we evacuated civilian populations from threatened areas." Peter stared at him. "That's not defense. That's retreat. What about military engagement? Where are your warships?" The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Several Council representatives exchanged glances that clearly said they hoped someone else would answer. "General," Chancellor Vextar finally said, "the Council doesn't have warships. We have exploration, vessels, research ships, and cargo transports. Some have basic shielding for navigational hazards, but nothing designed for combat." Peter felt his heart sink. It was worse than he had imagined. "In 3,000 years, you never built any military vessels, not even for planetary defense?" "We had no need," said a Takari representative, its logical mind struggling with the concept. "Military vessels are designed to destroy other vessels. Since we had no enemies, such ships would be wasteful and inefficient." "Well, you have enemies now," Peter said grimly. He turned to his aide, Colonel Jennifer Mason. "Jennifer, get Admiral Stone on the line. Tell her to bring the fleet to full combat readiness." The next few hours were a crash course in military reality for beings who had never experienced it. Peter tried to explain concepts that seemed alien to species that had evolved beyond warfare. "Force multiplication," he said to the assembled Council representatives, "means using your strengths to overcome enemy advantages. You can't match the Axiom ship for ship, but you can use speed, coordination, and tactics to level the playing field." A Yili delegate raised what Peter assumed was a hand. "But surely there must be a peaceful solution. These Axiom creatures must want something we can provide through negotiation." "They want you dead," Peter said bluntly. "They've made that clear. Some enemies can't be reasoned with, bargained with, or convinced to change their minds. Sometimes, the only choice is to fight or die." The first test of human military doctrine came sooner than expected. Captain Amanda Foster was commanding the UES Defiant when long-range sensors detected Axiom ships approaching the Kepler Junction, a critical, hyperspace nexus that connected 12 different star systems. "All ships, this is Defiant Actual," Amanda's voice crackled over the communication system. "Axiom contact bearing 27 Mark IV. Count as 15 heavy assault vessels, estimated arrival in 40 minutes. The response revealed the fundamental problem they faced. Council ships began moving into defensive formations that looked impressive but made no tactical sense. They clustered together, presenting perfect targets for the Axiom's energy-draining weapons. Council vessels, break formation, Amanda ordered. You're giving them consolidated targets. Spread out and use evasive maneuvers. But our defensive protocols require maintaining group cohesion, replied Captain Velmar of the Zalari cruiser Harmony's Dream. We must protect each other. You can't protect each other if you're all destroyed by the same attack, Amanda shot back. Trust me and follow our lead. When the Axiom ships arrived, they moved with a fluid grace that was beautiful and terrifying. Their organic hulls pulsed with collected energy from previous conquests, and they attacked with a coordination that spoke of shared consciousness. The first engagement was a disaster for the Council forces. 3 ships were destroyed in the opening minutes as their crews struggled to understand that their enemies were trying to kill them. The concept of intentional destruction was so foreign that many didn't even return fire until it was too late. Amanda watched the tactical display with growing frustration. All human vessels engage pattern Delta. We'll cover the Council ships while they retreat. The human ships moved with practiced precision, using aggressive maneuvers and coordinated attacks that the Axiom hadn't encountered before. The UES Defiant dropped below the plane of battle, using the gravity well of a nearby asteroid to slingshot into the enemy formation. The UES Vigilant provided covering fire, while the UES Reaper flanked from above. For the first time since the invasion began, Axiom ships were destroyed faster than they could adapt. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Half the Council vessels were lost and their crews died not understanding why anyone would want to hurt them. After the battle, Amanda met with the surviving Council captains in the Defiant's briefing room. The alien officers looked shaken and confused, struggling to process what they had experienced. They wanted to kill us, Captain Velmar said, his voice filled with wonder and horror. Not capture us, not take our resources, not force us to serve them. They wanted us to stop existing. Yes, Amanda said gently. That's what war means. It's not a game or a negotiation. It's about survival. Either you destroy them or they destroy you. Dr. Parker, who had been monitoring the battle from Harmony's Edge, joined the meeting via hologram. The Axiom ships that survived the engagement showed new behavioral patterns. They're learning from our tactics. That's what we expected, Amanda replied. The Axiom aren't just conquerors. They're evolving through combat. Every battle makes them stronger and smarter. The implications sank in slowly. The Council representatives realized they weren't just fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting against an enemy that grew more dangerous with every encounter. Back on Harmony's Edge, General Collins met with Chancellor Vextar and the newly formed War Council. The meeting room had been stripped of its peaceful decorations and filled with tactical displays and communication equipment. The battle at Kepler Junction proves 2 things, Collins said. First, the Axiom can be defeated. Human tactics and weapons are effective against them. Second, the Council forces need extensive training before they can fight effectively. Training in what? Asked Commander Zixara. War, Collins said simply. How to think like a soldier, how to move like a hunter, how to kill before you're killed. Things that humans learn from childhood, but that your species have spent millennia trying to forget. Chancellor Vextar's markings dimmed. General, what you're describing would change us fundamentally. We would no longer be the same species that joined together in peace 3,000 years ago. No, you wouldn't, Collins agreed. But you'd be alive. Sometimes that's the only choice that matters. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members argued that death was preferable to abandoning their core values. Others insisted that survival justified any transformation. In the end, it was a young Novan named Crixall who provided the deciding argument. If we die, she said, our values die with us. If we live, even if we're changed, we can teach future generations about the peace we once knew. The vote was close, but it passed. The Galactic Council officially requested that humanity teach them how to wage war. Collins looked around the room at beings who had just voted to abandon everything they believed in for the chance to survive. He felt no satisfaction in the victory, only a deep sadness for what they were about to lose. "Training begins tomorrow," he said. "May whatever gods you worship forgive us all for what we're about to become." Colonel Nancy Wright stood in the center of the training facility on Tertius Moon, watching as representatives from 17 different council species struggled with basic combat drills. The facility had been built in just 3 weeks, a testament to what the council could accomplish when survival was at stake. "Remember," Nancy called out to the mixed group of aliens, "speed is life. The faster you move, the harder you are to hit. The harder you are to hit, the longer you stay alive." A Kethani officer named Mistval raised what passed for a hand. "Colonel Wright, this concept troubles me deeply. We are training to deliberately harm other living beings. How can we maintain our spiritual balance while engaging in such activities?" Nancy had heard similar questions dozens of times in the past month. Each species brought their own philosophical struggles to the training ground. "Mistval, I understand your concerns. But the Axiom aren't going to respect your spiritual balance. They're going to try to kill you whether you're ready or not." The ethereal delegate whisper song flickered in distress. "But violence corrupts the soul, Colonel. Our entire civilization is built on the principle of harmonious existence. What you're asking us to do goes against millions of years of evolution." "Then evolve faster," Nancy said bluntly. "Because extinction is permanent." The training sessions were the most difficult part of Nancy's career. She had trained soldiers before, but never people who fundamentally opposed the very concept of fighting. Watching peaceful beings learn to kill was like watching children lose their innocence in Fast Forward. The Takari were the most logical about it, treating combat as a complex problem to be solved with precise calculations. The Novan embraced the training with disturbing enthusiasm, their young culture having fewer ingrained peaceful traditions to overcome. The Yili suffered the most, their empathic abilities making them feel every simulated death and injury as if it were their own. "Tactical Scenario 7, Nancy announced. "You're outnumbered 3-1. Your shields are down and your main weapons are offline. What do you do?" A young Zalari officer named Quicksilver raised his hand. "We surrender and hope for honorable treatment." "Wrong," Nancy said firmly. "You ram the nearest enemy ship. If you're going to die anyway, take as many of them with you as possible." The silence that followed was deafening. Several trainees looked physically ill at the suggestion. "Colonel," Whispersong said quietly, "you're asking us to become monsters." "No," Nancy replied. "I'm asking you to become survivors. There's a difference even if it doesn't feel like it right now." Meanwhile, Commander Luke Harrison was leading actual combat missions with mixed Human Council strike teams. The learning curve was steep and painted with blood. Their first joint operation was a raid on an Axiom forward base in the Cygnus sector. "Remember," Luke told his mixed crew aboard the scout ship UES Shadow, "we hit fast, gather intelligence, and get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks." His second in command was a Novan named Brightstar, one of the few aliens who seemed to understand combat instinctively. "Luke, the Axiom sensor grid has a gap every 47 seconds. That's our window." Luke nodded. The Novan had a gift for pattern recognition that made them excellent tactical officers. "All teams execute on my mark, 3, 2, 1 mark." The Shadow dropped out of hyperspace directly above the Axiom base, its stealth systems masking their approach. Luke watched the tactical display as his team moved through the alien facility, gathering data on Axiom technology and biology. "Team 3. Report," Luke said into his comm. "This is Mistval," came the shaky response. "We've found what appears to be a breeding chamber. Luke, they're not just ships. They're alive. The Axiom are growing new vessels inside captured council ships." The horror in the Kethani's voice was clear even through the translation device. Luke had seen the same reaction from every council species when they first encountered the true nature of their enemy. "Copy that, Mistval. Finish your scan and get back to the extraction point." The mission was a success in terms of intelligence gathered, but Luke watched as the psychological toll mounted on his alien teammates. They were learning to fight, but each lesson cost them a piece of their souls. Back at the medical center on Harmony's Edge, Captain Rachel Morgan was dealing with casualties that were as much psychological as physical. The council species were struggling with trauma in ways that human military medicine had never encountered. "Dr. Morgan," said Dr. Chental, a Takari psychiatrist, "I don't understand how human soldiers maintain their sanity during prolonged combat operations." Rachel looked up from her patient, a Yili pilot who had been catatonic since his first encounter with Axiom forces. "Most of us don't, Doctor. We just learn to function despite the damage." "But that's horrible," Chental said, his logical mind struggling with the concept. "You accept permanent psychological injury as a necessary cost of warfare?" "We accept it because the alternative is death," Rachel replied, "and dead people don't recover from trauma." The psychological casualties were mounting faster than the physical ones. Empathic species like the Yili were particularly vulnerable, often becoming overwhelmed by the emotional pain of combat. Several had to be permanently removed from active duty after single encounters with the enemy. Dr. Helen Parker spent her time studying the Axiom, trying to understand their nature and find weaknesses. What she discovered was more disturbing than anyone had imagined. The Axiom aren't just predators, she reported to the War Council. They're a species that evolved through constant warfare. Their entire biology is designed for combat and consumption. They literally cannot exist without conflict. General Collins leaned forward. "Are you saying they're incapable of peace?" "More than that," Helen replied, her misty form flickering with distress. "Peace would actually kill them. They need to fight and consume to survive. We're not dealing with conquerors who might be satisfied with victory. We're dealing with creatures who must destroy everything they encounter or die themselves." The implications were staggering. There could be no negotiation, no treaty, no peaceful coexistence. The war would continue until either the Axiom or everyone else was dead. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner was working with a group of young Novan cadets when the breakthrough came. Unlike the older council species, the Novan had less cultural baggage about warfare. They approached combat training like an interesting puzzle to be solved. "Commander Turner," said Cadet Brightwing, "what if we combined human aggressive tactics with our natural pattern recognition abilities?" Alex paused his demonstration. "What do you mean?" "Humans attack where the enemy is weak," Brightwing explained. "But we Novan can see patterns that humans miss. If we predict where the enemy will be weak before they know it themselves, we could strike preemptively." It was a simple concept, but it represented something revolutionary. For the first time, a council species wasn't just learning human tactics, they were improving on them. "Show me," Alex said. The resulting training exercises were remarkable. The young Novan cadets began developing hybrid tactics that combined human aggression with alien abilities. They could predict enemy movements, identify weaknesses before they appeared, and coordinate attacks with a precision that impressed even veteran human officers. Word of the Novan success spread quickly through the training centers. Other species began experimenting with their own approaches to warfare, finding ways to adapt human tactics to their unique abilities. But success came with a price. Alex watched as the young Novan transformed from curious students into efficient killers. Their natural enthusiasm made them excellent soldiers, but it also meant they lost their innocence faster than species who struggled with the concepts. "Commander," Brightwing said after a particularly successful simulation, "I think I'm beginning to understand why humans are so good at warfare." "Why is that?" Alex asked. "Because you don't have to overcome peaceful instincts," Brightwing replied. "Violence comes naturally to you. We have to fight against millions of years of evolution to become soldiers. You were born ready for war." Alex felt a chill at the casual way the young alien spoke about human nature. He was right, of course, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly was unsettling. The first major victory of the unified Human Council fleet came at the Battle of Sanctuaries Gate. The combined force included ships from over 50 council species, each now equipped with weapons and trained in human tactical doctrine. Admiral Stone commanded the operation from the UES Defiant, coordinating with alien officers who had learned to think like soldiers. The battle plan was complex, involving simultaneous attacks on multiple fronts using the unique abilities of each species. All units. This is Defiant Actual, Stone announced. Execute pattern harmony on my mark. Let's show these monsters what we've learned. The battle was brutal but decisive. Human ships provided the aggressive core of the attack, while Council vessels used their unique abilities to support and enhance the assault. Novan ships predicted enemy movements. Kethani vessels phased through enemy fire, and Takari ships calculated optimal firing solutions with mathematical precision. When the last Axiom ship was destroyed, the combined fleet had achieved their first major victory. But Alex looked around at the celebrating alien crews and felt a deep sadness. 18 months after the Axiom invasion began, Admiral Karen Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, looking at the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from over 300 species stretched across space like a metal constellation. Each vessel now bearing weapons that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. "Admiral," reported Commander Tony Green, "all battle groups report ready for Operation Hammerstrike. We have confirmation from fleet commanders representing 247 species." Karen nodded, but felt no joy at the sight. The fleet was magnificent and terrible, a testament to what the galaxy could accomplish when united in warfare. Every ship carried the scars of battles fought, lessons learned in blood and sacrifice. "Signal all ships," Karen ordered. "We jump to the Andromeda Reach in 10 minutes. This ends today." The Andromeda Reach had once been a beautiful star cluster known for its peaceful research stations and artistic colonies. Now it was the heart of Axiom territory, a twisted landscape of consumed worlds and grown warships that pulsed with stolen energy. Captain Amanda Foster commanded a joint battle group that included ships from 12 different species. The UES Reaper flew alongside the Novan destroyer Swift Strike, the Zalari cruiser New Harmony, and the Takari battleship Logical Conclusion. Each crew had been forged in the fires of war, transformed from explorers and scientists into soldiers. "Reaper actual to all ships," Amanda announced. "Target the primary nodes first. Remember, these things learn from every attack, so we only get one chance to use each tactic." The response came in a dozen different languages, but the meaning was the same. They understood. They were ready. The battle began with a massive, coordinated strike that lit up space like a new sun. Council ships that had once carried only peaceful greetings now launched missiles designed to crack planets. Exploration vessels that had spent centuries studying stars now used that knowledge to predict enemy movements and plan devastating attacks. The Axiom responded with a fury that seemed impossible. Their organic ships twisted through space like living nightmares, adapting to each attack pattern within minutes. But this time, the galaxy was ready. "All Novan units, execute pattern recognition." "7," called out Captain Brightstar from the Swift Strike. The young officer who had once asked innocent questions about human warfare now coordinated strikes with cold precision. The Novan ships moved in perfect synchronization, predicting Axiom movements and striking at weaknesses before they fully formed. Their natural pattern recognition abilities had been honed into a weapon as deadly as any human missile. "Kethani phase ships, initiate Ghost Protocol," ordered Commander Mistval, his once peaceful voice now carrying the hard edge of a veteran warrior. The misty vessels became partially incorporeal, passing through Axiom fire to strike at vulnerable internal systems. Amanda watched the tactical display and felt a mixture of pride and horror. The Council species had learned their lessons well. Too well, perhaps. They fought with an efficiency that would have impressed any human general. But she remembered when these same beings had been incapable of understanding why anyone would want to hurt another living creature. The assault on the Axiom Prime Mind was led by Amanda herself, commanding a strike force of the most experienced human and council officers. The Prime Mind was a massive organic structure that served as the central intelligence coordinating all Axiom forces. Destroying it would end the war, but getting close enough would require sacrifices that the old council would never have considered. "All ships, final approach," Amanda announced. "Remember, we're not coming back from this one. Make it count." The volunteers who had stepped forward for the suicide mission represented every major species in the council. They flew their ships, into the heart of the Prime Mine's defenses, each crew knowing they would not survive to see victory. Captain Velmar of the Zalari ship, Last Hope, spoke for all of them in his final transmission. For those we could not save, and for those who will never have to learn what we have learned. The explosion that followed destroyed the Prime Mind and ended the Axiom threat forever. But as the cheers of victory echoed across the fleet, Amanda felt only emptiness. They had won, but the cost was more than just the ships and lives lost in battle. Dr. Helen Parker's final analysis of the Axiom revealed the truth that would haunt the galaxy for generations to come. They were once peaceful, she reported to the War Council. Millions of years ago, the Axiom were explorers and artists, much like the early Council species. But contact with another warlike civilization transformed them into what we fought. The parallel was impossible to ignore. The Axiom had been created by learning warfare from a violent species, just as the Council had learned from humanity. The question that no one wanted to ask was whether the galaxy would follow the same path. Chancellor Vexistar, his silver markings now permanently dimmed by the weight of command decisions, presided over the formation of the new Galactic Compact. The document that emerged was nothing like the peaceful charter that had governed the galaxy for 3,000 years. Article 1, he read to the assembled representatives, every member species shall maintain a standing military force capable of planetary defense. Article 2, all member worlds will participate in joint military exercises and combat training. Article 3, the War Council shall have permanent authority to mobilize forces against external threats. The old council had been governed by consensus and peaceful negotiation. The new compact was a military alliance first and a diplomatic organization second. The transformation was complete. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez, now bearing the scars and gray hair that came from years of wartime diplomacy, addressed the assembly. "We have saved the galaxy," she said quietly. "But we have also changed it forever. The question we must ask ourselves is whether this change was worth the price." General Collins, now promoted to Supreme Military Commander of the Compact, established the new protocols that would govern galactic civilization. Every species would maintain military academies. Every ship would carry weapons. Every citizen would receive basic combat training. "We will never again be caught unprepared," he announced to the Military Council. "The galaxy has learned that peace is not the natural state of the universe, it must be defended." But in the quiet moments between ceremonies and speeches, the veterans of the war struggled with what they had become. Commander Luke Harrison, who had led some of the first joint missions, found himself unable to sleep without dreaming of the aliens he had taught to kill. "We saved them," he told Captain Rachel Morgan during one of their conversations in the medical bay. "But we also destroyed them. The species that exist now aren't the same ones that welcomed us to the Council." Rachel, who had treated both physical and psychological casualties throughout the war, nodded sadly. "The Yili can barely function anymore. Their empathic abilities make it impossible for them to forget the pain they've caused and witnessed. The ethereal have lost their connection to whatever spiritual realm they once accessed. Even the logical Takari show signs of trauma that their rational minds can't process. The galaxy was safe, but it was no longer peaceful." Children of Council, species now played war games instead of artistic competitions. Scientists developed weapons technology with the same enthusiasm they had once reserved for exploration. Diplomats spoke in terms of military strength and strategic advantage, rather than cultural exchange and mutual understanding. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner, now a senior instructor at the Galactic Military Academy, watched new cadets from dozens of species learn the lessons of warfare. They were efficient, deadly, and utterly unlike their predecessors. "Sir," asked a young Novan cadet, "why do the historical records show that Council species were once incapable of warfare? How could any sentient species survive without military capability?" Alex looked at the eager young face and realized that this generation would never understand what had been lost. To them, the galaxy had always been a place where survival required strength and victory required sacrifice. "They were different then," Alex said quietly. "They believed that intelligence and goodwill could solve any problem. They thought that all conflicts could be resolved through understanding and compromise. But that's impossible, the cadet replied. How can you negotiate with an enemy that wants to destroy you? You can't, Alex admitted. That's the lesson we taught them. That's the lesson that changed everything. As the ceremony ended and the new council began its work, Ambassador Rodriguez stood at the observation deck looking out at the fleet that now permanently patrolled galactic space. Ships designed for war moved in formations perfected through blood and loss. A young aide approached her, carrying reports of new civilizations detected at the galaxy's edge. Ma'am, the scout ships have made contact with 3 new species beyond the rim. The War Council wants to know if they should assess their military capabilities. Rodriguez closed her eyes, remembering a time when first contact meant sharing art and culture rather than measuring threat levels. Yes, she said finally. Assess their capabilities. We need to know if they're friends or enemies. The aide saluted and left to carry out the orders. Rodriguez remained at the window, watching humanity's greatest gift and curse spread through the stars.